They say in the risk assessment industry, you have to account for every variable. I evaluated markets, technology, personnel. I just never evaluated my own husband. He thought he was building a new life. He didn't realize he was just building my case file, and by the time he realized what I had done, the only thing he had left was the lie he was wearing. My name is Alara Vance. I am a senior risk analyst at Vigilant Analytics, and my job is to see the vectors of failure before they form. I anticipate collapse. I model ruin. It is a skill that has made me very wealthy, very respected, and, as of late, very tired. The flight to Crestwood, Colorado, was a last-minute decision, booked with my own money, not the firm's. Julian was supposed to be here for the Aegis Summit. He had called it a high-stress work trip, his voice tight with feigned exhaustion. He needed to focus, he said. He could not be disturbed. He had also forgotten our 10th anniversary. The guilt was mine, or so I thought. I had been buried in a particularly brutal quarter, unwinding a portfolio for a client that was 90% vaporware. I had been distant. I had been working late. I assumed my distraction had created his. So, I decided to fix it. I would fly in, surprise him, and we would use the resort's amenities to reconnect. I imagined his look of surprise, the way he would laugh and pull me close, the tension leaving his shoulders. I was fixing a variable. The resort was nestled in the mountains, a monolith of glass and reclaimed timber. The air was thin and cold, biting at my cheeks as I walked from the car service. Inside, the main reception hall for the Aegis Summit was already humming. The sound was familiar, polite laughter, the clinking of glasses, the low murmur of men and women assessing each other's value. I bypassed the main summit registration and went straight to the hotel concierge, flashing my Vigilant credentials. My clearance is high. In our world, Vigilant Analytics is the gold standard. Julian's venture capital firm was still just a hopeful startup. The badge worked its magic. The concierge did not even blink. "I'm here to surprise my husband, Julian Vance," I said, offering a warm, conspiratorial smile. "I just need his room number so I can drop my bags before I find him." The young woman at the desk smiled back, her efficiency bright and smooth. How wonderful a surprise anniversary. "Something like that," I said. She tapped at her keyboard. Here we are. It looks like Mr. and Mrs. Vance are already checked in." She gestured to the open ledger on the desk. "Mrs. Vance just signed in right here." My smile froze. I felt the air in my lungs turn cold. I looked down. The name on the line was Sophia Vance. The handwriting was a looping feminine script that I had never seen before. It was not my signature. My blood pressure dropped, but my training took over. I processed the data. This was an anomaly. This was a threat. "That's strange," I said, keeping my voice light. "My apologies. I must be at the wrong desk. This is for the summit, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. For the Aegis Summit." I looked up from the ledger, my eyes scanning the room. The hall was full of dark suits and expensive dresses. And then I saw him, Julian. He was standing near the large fireplace, a glass of champagne in one hand. He looked relaxed, confident, wearing the navy blue suit I had bought him for his birthday. His other hand was intertwined with the fingers of a young woman. She was blonde, bright, and wearing a tight silver dress that shimmered in the low light. She could not have been more than 25. I did not recognize her. Sophia Croft. The name flickered in my memory from a peripheral file. A competitor's daughter. They were laughing. He leaned in and kissed her temple. It was not a friendly gesture. It was proprietary. My stomach did not drop. My heart did not break. It was stranger than that. The world simply snapped into focus, as if I had been looking through a blurry lens for a decade and had suddenly found the adjustment knob. A microphone screeched briefly, pulling the room's attention to the small stage at the far end. A man in a moderator's blazer was tapping the mic. "If I could have everyone's attention," he announced, his voice booming artificially. "We'd like to get started. And now, please welcome the man who helped make this all possible, our platinum sponsor, Julian Vance, and his wonderful wife and partner, Sophia. I watched, frozen, as Julian and the blonde woman Sophia walked toward the stage, their hands still linked. They moved as a unit. They climbed the 2 small steps. Julian took the microphone, his smile wide and practiced. Thank you, he began. The room applauded. It's an honor to be here. I wouldn't have been able to pull this off, any of this, without my rock. He turned and beamed at the woman beside him, placing a hand on her back. My wife, Sophia. She's the one who truly keeps me grounded. I did not run. I did not scream. I took 2 steps back, merging with the deep shadows near a service corridor. The polite laughter of the crowd was a dull roar in my ears. I pulled my phone from my purse. I unlocked it, opened the camera, and switched it to video. I raised it, my hand perfectly steady, and hit the red record button. I filmed the entire speech, every lie, every loving glance he gave her, every time he referred to her as his wife. I was not a wife being betrayed. I was an analyst, watching a critical system failure in real time. I was not crying. I was collecting data. I left the resort without speaking to a soul. No one noticed. I was just another shadow in a dark suit, slipping out of the grand hall as Julian's voice, amplified and confident, continued to thank his wife. The drive back to Denver was 3 hours. A blizzard had descended on the mountains, and the world outside my windshield was a chaotic swirl of white. The rental car's wipers fought a losing battle against the snow. Inside, the car was silent except for the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the wipers and the sound from my phone, which I had propped up on the dashboard. I played the video. Again and again. I wouldn't have been able to pull this off without my rock, my wife, Sophia. His smile, her adoring gaze, the applause. I was not hysterical. I was not weeping. The shock was a physical thing, a sheet of ice forming over my skin, insulating me. The emotional response was a luxury I could not afford. It was a data point I would file for later. Right now, I was in assessment mode. The 3 hours were not spent grieving. They were spent analyzing. The problem was not the affair. The affair was a symptom. The problem was the public, strategic declaration of a false marriage at a high-stakes investor summit. That was not a crime of passion. That was a calculated move. I arrived at my home office in Denver just before 3 in the morning. The house was cold and silent. I did not turn on the main lights. I went straight to my office, a room secured by a biometric lock that Julian had always joked was overkill. He had never been inside. My specialty is not just risk analysis. It is forensic cleanup and risk assessment. I am the person high-level clients call when a system has been so deeply compromised that they can no longer tell which parts are real and which are the infection. I sat in my chair. The city lights of Denver, a distant, blurred constellation through the snow. I looked at my secure server array, its quiet blue lights blinking in the darkness. My mind was already working, not in terms of destruction, but in terms of vulnerability. This was a 0-day exploit. A flaw in my own system's architecture that had been present from the beginning, lying dormant, waiting for a user with malicious intent to find it. And Julian had... I pulled up our shared financials. But shared was a misnomer. I had built the wealth. I had established the lines of credit. I had founded Vigilant Analytics long before I met him. His venture capital firm, the one he had started 3 years ago, was, I realized with a sickening clarity, built entirely on my reputation, my credit, and my assets. I was his collateral. He was not a partner. He was a parasite. The post-nuptial agreement I had insisted on 5 years ago, during his first risky venture, he had called it unromantic. He had acted wounded, asking, "Don't you trust me, Alara?" I had held firm, citing it as a simple, business precaution to protect my company's assets from any potential liabilities he might incur. That document was now my primary tool. I looked at the life we had built. It was a corrupted data set. Julian was not my husband. He was a piece of malware. My job, my only job, was clear. Isolate the threat, neutralize the malware, and restore the system to a clean, uncompromised state. The anger was there, a cold, dense star in my chest, but I compartmentalized it. Anger was fuel, not a strategy. I picked up my secure line and dialed my lawyer. The clock on the wall read 3:07 a.m. Marcus Thorne would be asleep, but he would answer. He was paid to answer. He picked up on the second ring, his voice instantly awake and sharp. "Ilara?" "He's compromised the entire system. Marcus," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm sending you a file. We need to initiate the containment protocol from the post-nup. Asset lockdown. Immediately." "What happened?" "He's publicly claiming a new wife to secure funding." There was a pause. "Send the file." While Marcus began the legal firewall, I began my own forensic dive. I had credentials for every server he used, including the private one for his venture firm. He assumed I did not check. He had grown careless. I expected to find the emails, the declarations of love, the plans for a future, the travel receipts. I found them. Of course. They were sickening, but they were irrelevant noise. Then I found the other folder, the one marked Contingency LGL. It was not love letters. It was a scanned document, a marriage certificate from a small non-extradition island nation I had barely heard of. It was dated 6 months ago. Julian Vance and Sophia Croft. My breath caught. This was not an affair. This was not bigamy. This was organized, premeditated fraud. He had created a new legal identity, a new wife, with the specific intent of building a life completely firewalled from his obligations to me. He was not just leaving me. He was planning to erase me. I looked at the signature on the document. Then I pulled up the loan application for his firm, the one I had supposedly co-signed. He had been practicing my signature. He had gotten very good at it. I saved the files to my secure server, the blue lights blinking. The ice inside me was no longer a shield. It was a weapon. I was in Marcus Thorne's office by 7 a.m. His firm occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower downtown, a place that smelled of old money and high-stakes litigation. Marcus was not a man you went to for sympathy. He was a man you went to for a controlled demolition. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had eyes that assessed everything for its value or its weakness. He specialized in high asset and intellectual property divorces. 3 a.m. Ilara, he said, not as a complaint, but as a statement of fact. He gestured to a steel and glass conference table. This had better be spectacular. It is, I said. I did not sit. I connected my secure tablet to his wall-mounted display. I did not show him the marriage certificate or the forged loan first. I showed him the video. I pressed play. The grand hall of the Aegis Summit filled the screen. Julian's voice filled the silent, sterile office. My rock, my wife, Sophia. Marcus watched the entire 4-minute speech without blinking. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on the screen. When it finished, the room was silent again. He did not offer condolences. He did not ask how I was feeling. A slow, thin smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a shark that had just caught the scent of blood in the water. Well, he said, the word clipped and precise. This is not a divorce, Ilara. This is a public declaration of fraud. He is actively using your name, your reputation, and by extension, your assets, to secure transactions under a false identity. He has a marriage certificate, I said. I swiped the tablet, bringing up the scanned document from the island nation. Marcus's smile widened. Even better. Premeditated. Organized. This is not a man who fell in love. This is a man who drafted a business plan. And this, I said, bringing up the last file. The The loan application for his venture firm. The one that had secured his initial $1 million in seed capital. The one with my forged signature on the co-applicant line. Marcus looked at the signature, then at me. "This is the thread," he said, his voice brimming with a cold, professional glee. "This is the one we pull." "I want to freeze him," I said. "Everything." "No." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city. "A full asset freeze is loud. He'll know you're onto him, he'll panic, and he'll start hiding data, moving money to accounts we can't find. You don't want to just win, Alara. You want to annihilate." He turned back to me. "The forged loan gives us a different entry point. We don't file for divorce. We file an emergency injunction with the bank, citing signatory fraud. We quietly, surgically, place a lien on his business account. We don't freeze his personal cards. Let him keep buying his new wife champagne. But his business operations will be completely paralyzed within 48 hours. He'll assume it's a simple bank error, not an execution." He was right. A surgical strike. Isolate the target. "Do it," I said. Marcus nodded. "Now, the post-nup." He brought it up on his own screen. As I recall, this was one of my favorite pieces of work. It is, as the vulgar saying goes, ironclad. He scrolled through the clauses. All intellectual property, all business assets, all proprietary analytics developed by you, associated with, or housed within Vigilant Analytics, are yours, exclusively, in perpetuity. His claims are zero. His access is zero. He knows that, I said, thinking aloud. The pieces were not fitting. Julian is stupid, but he's not that stupid. He knows he can't touch Vigilant. So why this elaborate play, the public sponsorship, the fake wife, the new firm built on a fraudulent loan? What is he actually trying to sell? My blood ran cold. It was not a question. I knew the answer. It was the one thing he had access to. Not as a principal, but as my husband. The one thing he had seen me build, test, and perfect. The one thing my competitors would kill for. "My algorithm," I whispered. Marcus looked at me. "Your what?" "My proprietary risk assessment model. Ariadne. It's the core of Vigilant. He's not trying to build his own company. Marcus, he's trying to sell mine." The entire fraud was a stage. He was presenting himself as a new, independent player, backed by his wife, to sell a stolen asset. He was going to gut my life's work and sell the hollowed-out corpse. The final piece of data slotted into place. Sophia Croft. The name had been nagging at me. It was not just a random name. I turned back to my tablet, my fingers flying. I bypassed my usual firewalls and accessed the Vigilant primary database. I ran her name. Sophia Croft. Age, 26. Graduated from Wharton 2 years ago. Minor in data science. No significant employment history. And then, the critical field. Family. Father Arthur Croft. I looked at Marcus. "It's not just fraud," I said, the words tasting like acid. "It's corporate espionage. Arthur Croft, the CEO of Phoenix Strategic Solutions, my largest, most ruthless competitor, the one man who had spent the last 5 years trying to poach my team and replicate my work. Sophia was not a naive girl swept up in an affair. She was a soldier. This was not a romance. It was an infiltration. And Julian, my husband, was the willing traitor who had opened the gates from the inside. Marcus was handling the legal injunction, the public-facing weapon. But I was an analyst. I needed the full data set. I returned to the cold silence of my home office, the secure room Julian had never entered, and I went to work. He thought he was digitally invisible. He was wrong. We had a shared secure server, a high-capacity drive I had set up years ago for our household files tax documents, estate plans, a repository he eventually co-opted for his own fledgling business. He believed his section was private, protected by an encryption key he had created. It was my architecture, my firewall. I had the admin-level credentials for the entire system. I had always had them. I just never had a reason to use them. It took me less than 5 minutes to bypass his user-level security. I was not looking for the obvious. I was looking for the hidden, and I found it. A hidden partition, cloaked to appear as corrupted data, a string of unallocated space, but it had a tag. Project Aegis. My blood ran cold. The name of the summit. He was not just arrogant, he was sentimental. I uncloaked the partition. The first layer was the one I expected: the emails, the travel receipts, the chats with Sophia. I ignored them. They were noise, designed to distract from the real signal. I went deeper. I found the spreadsheets. This was his real plan. This was the true conspiracy. It was not just Julian and Sophia. It was Julian, Sophia, and her father, Arthur Croft. The metadata on the files showed they had been in active development for over a year. An entire year of my life, my marriage, had been a lie. They were not just planning to leave me, they were planning to destroy me. I opened the first file, a detailed financial projection. They were siphoning money, but not from our personal accounts. That would be too obvious, too easily traced. They were soapily stealing from me, but from my company, from the Vigilant Analytics Research and Development Fund. Julian, using his access as my husband, had approved a series of consulting invoices over the last 10 months. They were small at first, then larger, payments to a shell LLC I had never heard of. Croft Vance Solutions. The bank records showed the sole signatory on that account was Sophia. They were using my own R&D budget, the money I had allocated to build the next generation of my algorithm, to fund their escape. But the money was not the goal. It was just the seed capital. The real prize was detailed in the next spreadsheet, a presentation deck watermarked Phoenix Strategic Confidential. They were stealing Ariadne, my algorithm, my life's work. The deck detailed a complete plan to integrate my proprietary code into Arthur Croft's existing systems. They had copied the source code. Julian must have accessed my work terminal while I slept. They were planning to sell it to Phoenix for a staggering sum, contingent on one thing: publicly discrediting me and Vigilant Analytics. This was their plan. This was the Aegis Summit. So, Julian would announce his new wife, establishing his independence. Then, he and Sophia would use the stolen code and the R&D money to launch a new company, which Arthur Croft would then acquire, claiming his team had innovated the technology. I would be left with a gutted R&D budget, a stolen algorithm, and a reputation in tatters. I thought the betrayal was complete. I was wrong. I found a subfolder, S Narrative. It contained drafts, notes, and something that made my stomach turn: audio files. I clicked on a document first. It was a draft of a legal statement, a story Julian was preparing for Sophia. It claimed that he was the true architect of the Ariadne algorithm, that he had developed the core concept years ago, and that I, his emotionally controlling, obsessive wife, had stolen it, pushed him out, and built Vigilant on his genius. He was not just betraying me, he was playing her. He was painting himself as the wronged visionary, and Sophia as the woman who was finally helping him reclaim his legacy. He was using her, her father, and my algorithm in a single devastating con. Then I clicked on the audio files. They were memos, recordings of Julian, practicing his lines, or perhaps leaving notes for Sophia. His voice, the voice I had loved, filled the silent room. "You have to understand," he was saying, his tone saturated with false sincerity. "Alara she's not stable. She's brilliant, but she's emotionally volatile. Her obsession with work, it's consumed her. She'll get paranoid. She'll think I'm the bad guy." Another file. "She'll try to destroy us, Soph. She'll say I stole this, but it's mine. We're just taking back what's mine. You just have to be strong and hold my hand when she starts to unravel." I closed the file. The last ember of grief turned to ice. He was not just leaving me. He was not just stealing from me. He was methodically crafting a narrative to have me dismissed as a hysterical, unstable woman, while he walked away with my entire life. He had assessed his risks. He had built his case. He just did not know that I was building mine faster. This was no longer a divorce. It was a counterintelligence operation. My initial instinct, the one Marcus had advised, was surgical containment, a legal injunction, a clean cut. But the data I had uncovered changed the parameters. Julian and the Crofts were not just stealing from me, they were planning a public execution of my reputation. A simple injunction was no longer sufficient. This required a full-scale response. My first move was to not move. I did not block Julian's access to the shared server. I did not change a single password. I did not let Marcus proceed with the asset freeze. I told him to wait for my signal. A predator, once it knows it's being hunted, will bolt for cover. I needed Julian to stay in the open, confident, arrogant, and blind. Instead of building walls, I opened a door. I went into the back end of my own algorithm. Ariadne. I copied the core code, the real, priceless code he had already stolen, and I began to corrupt it. I created a new version, a perfect-looking replica. It was a Trojan horse. I spent the next 48 hours coding, fueled by a cold, clean rage. I wove a logic bomb deep into the source code, a string of commands that would lie dormant until a specific condition was met. I set the trigger the moment the code was executed on any server not bearing Vigilant's unique digital signature. At a specific date and time I had already mapped from their presentation deck. When Julian and Sophia ran my algorithm for their investors, it would not show them projected profits. It would execute my command. Next, I built a honeypot. On the shared server, I created a new, seemingly hidden folder. I labeled it Vigilant Internal Audit Q4. Inside, I planted a series of beautifully crafted, completely false documents, memos detailing non-existent structural weaknesses in my company, falsified performance reviews showing my team in disarray, and a private analysis suggesting Ariadne was producing flawed results nearly 8% of the time. I made it look like the kind of damaging, internal-only data a paranoid CEO would hide. I knew Julian, in his effort to prove to Arthur Croft that I was unstable and my company was failing, would not be able to resist stealing it. He would hand-deliver my disinformation to my enemy. My quiet clicks were now weapons. I set up real-time monitoring on all his accounts. I used a deep-level tracker, one that mirrored his every digital move. I watched as he logged into the shared server. I watched as he found the audit folder. I watched him download every file. The bait was taken. Then, I opened a new encrypted line of communication. I sent a message to Sarah Jensen, a financial journalist at the Wall Street Journal. Sarah and I had a professional respect. I had given her legitimate leads in the past. My tip was anonymous, untraceable. Check the credentials of a venture capitalist named Julian Vance. I wrote. He's the platinum sponsor at the Aegis Summit. Sources say his entire capital firm is built on a series of fraudulent loans, and he's operating using his wife's forged credentials. He's about to sell a stolen asset to Arthur Croft at Phoenix. I attached one file, the forged $1 million loan application. I knew she would start digging. I was monitoring his financial activity, watching him spend lavishly in Crestwood on my credit. When a new alert pinged, it was not a charge. It was a credit inquiry against my name. My blood turned to ice. It was a hard pull from a private mortgage lender. I dove into the lender's portal. My security clearance was higher than theirs. Julian, using a near-perfect forgery of my signature and a fake power of attorney, had applied for an emergency line of credit against my penthouse. The penthouse I owned. The one that was in my name, and my name alone, from before we were married. He was not just trying to steal my algorithm. He was trying to liquidate my largest physical asset. He was trying to cash out, to drain the equity, and run. He had just made his final fatal mistake. He had given me the one thing I was missing proof of intent to flee. This was no longer just corporate espionage. This was a federal crime. And I had him. Cold. I was in the middle of tracing the wire transfer from the mortgage lender when my personal phone rang. It was not my work phone, which was silent, but my private cell, the one only family had. The caller ID read Chloe. I stared at it. My sister. My flighty, well-meaning, younger sister. I let it ring twice more before answering, composing my voice into a mask of normalcy. Chloe, hey. What's up? Ilara. Oh, thank God you answered. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. She sounded strange, distant. I've been trying to reach you. You haven't been answering your texts. I've been busy, Chloe. Just buried in that new quarterly assessment. You know how it is. There was a pause. Are you sure that's all? Are you okay? The question was not kind. It was probing. It was the question of someone who had already been given an answer. I'm fine, Chloe. Why wouldn't I be? I don't know, she said, and the defensiveness in her voice was palpable. Julian called Mom and Dad. Ilara, he's really worried about you. The coldness in my chest, which I thought had reached its absolute zero, dropped another 10 degrees. Worried, I repeated, my voice flat. He said you're working yourself to the bone. Chloe rushed on, as if reading from a script. That you're not sleeping. That you've gotten, I don't know, a little paranoid lately. He said you might be upset with him, that he had to stay for this big conference, but that you're just not yourself. He had poisoned the well. This was the S narrative from his hidden files. This was the story he was planting. I was the unstable, obsessive, paranoid wife. He was the concerned, loving husband, helpless to stop my brilliant but tragic unraveling. He said, Chloe continued, her voice dropping, that you might say some strange things, Ilara, that he just wants you to get help. He told us not to believe everything you say right now, that he's just trying to protect you. I closed my eyes. Julian had not just built a firewall between himself and me. He had built one between me and my own family. He had isolated me, not just financially, but personally. He had turned my last potential allies into his unwitting shields. Ilara, are you there? Julian sounds so hurt. Are you having problems? You could say that. Chloe, I said, my voice empty. I have to go. Ilara, wait. Mom and Dad are worried sick. I hung up. The isolation was complete. He had turned the narrative. I was no longer the victim. I was the perpetrator of my own breakdown. A new, terrible thought began to form. A risk I had never, ever calculated. Julian was not just talking to my family. He was wooing them. And Julian, when he wanted something, was relentlessly charming. I had set up my family's financial accounts years ago. My parents' retirement. Chloe's small nest egg. I had put them in secure, low-risk index funds. I had the admin passwords. I had done it to protect them. My fingers were trembling, but not from grief, from dread. I logged into my parents' retirement portfolio, the one I had built for them, the one that was supposed to fund their old age. The balance was wrong. It was not just low. It was almost empty. I stared at the screen. I ran a transaction report. It could not be. It was not possible. 4 months ago, a single wire transfer, a withdrawal of the entire balance, $450,000. I logged out and logged into Chloe's account. The same. A withdrawal. 3 months ago, $350,000. I tracked the destination account for both transfers. It was an LLC, Croft Vance Solutions, the shell company, the one he and Sophia were using to siphon my R&D funds. The air left my lungs. He had not just convinced them I was unstable. He had convinced them to invest their entire lives, their entire futures, in his fantasy. Over $800,000 of my family's money. He was not just robbing me. He was robbing them. He was robbing them, and he was using me as the reason. When this all blew up, when the money was gone, who would they believe, the charming son-in-law who was worried about his unstable wife, or the paranoid, obsessive, hysterical woman who had supposedly driven him away? He had taken everything. This was the last variable, the one I had not seen. Any last lingering molecule of mercy I possessed evaporated. This was no longer a counterintelligence operation. This was an extermination. I had been running simulations for nearly 48 hours straight, debugging the logic bomb. The code was clean, but it had to be more than clean. It had to be invisible. I was so deep in the analysis, tracing data pathways, that I did not hear the door to my secure office unlock. Only one other person in the world had the biometric key. I'd say, "What the hell are you doing?" But the server logs are telling me in real time. Ben Carter, my business partner, the co-founder of Vigilant Analytics. He was the firm's chief technology officer, a cybersecurity expert who could trace a single data packet across 3 continents. He was my partner, my friend, and the only voice of reason I had ever truly listened to. He looked pale, holding a tablet that was clearly mirroring my activity. "You're running a corrupted version of Ariadne in a sandboxed command shell. You're testing an exploit, Ilara, against our own IP. You have 5 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't hit the kill switch and lock this entire building down." I looked at his face, the exhaustion, the genuine fear. I hit the manual lock on the door. The heavy, magnetic thud sealed us inside. "They've already breached the walls." "Ben," I said, "I'm just finding out how deep the rot goes." "What are you talking about?" "Julian," I said. The name hung in the air. Ben's expression shifted from professional anger to confusion. I turned my main display toward him. "I need you to be my partner right now, not my CTO. I need you to just listen." I showed him everything. I did not show him the video from the summit. That was emotion. I showed him the data. I started with the forged $1 million loan application. Ben leaned in, his eyes scanning the metadata. "That's not your signature. It's a damn good fake, but the pressure metric is wrong." "It was good enough for the bank," I said. I switched the screen. "He used it to fund this." I showed him the Croft Vance Solutions LLC. Croft, Ben said, the name sharp. As in Arthur Croft. As in Arthur Croft. I confirmed. I brought up the next file, the Stolen Phoenix presentation deck, detailing the plan to steal Ariadne. Ben was no longer looking at the screen. He was looking at me, the horror dawning. He's in bed with Phoenix. He's selling Ariadne Ilara. We have to go to the SEC. We file the injunction. We stop this now. He's already insulated himself," I said. I brought up the audio files. The S narrative. The story of the unstable wife. "He's poisoned the well, Ben. By the time we get an injunction, he'll be gone, the code will be gone, and I'll be dismissed as a scorned, paranoid woman. He's planned for this." Ben, my brilliant partner, the man who saw every angle of a digital attack, looked physically ill. He understood. He had been played, too. He had been to my home for dinner. He had drunk Julian's wine. "But it's not the worst part," I said, my voice quiet. I brought up the last file, the bank statements, my parents' retirement, Chloe's savings, the $800,000. Ben stared at the screen for a full minute. He did not move. Then he walked to the far side of my office, to the window, and just looked out at the city below. He was the voice of reason. He was the break. "My God, Ilara," he whispered, not turning around. "He's not just a traitor. He's a sociopath." He turned back, and the man who had walked in, my worried partner, was gone. In his place was a co-conspirator. "You're going to burn him," Ben said. It was not a question. "You're going to burn him to the ground." "I am," I said. "This is not a clean operation. If you miscalculate, if this logic bomb of yours is traced back to you, the fire doesn't just burn him, it burns us. It burns Vigilant. They'll call it corporate sabotage. We will be ruined, and he will walk away as the victim. I nodded. I know the risks. Good. He walked over to my secondary workstation, the one linked to the same server, and sat down. He cracked his knuckles. Because this isn't just revenge, Ilara. This is a hostile takeover. I'm in. I looked at him, startled. Ben, you don't have to shut up, he said, already typing. I've looked at your code. It's elegant. It's also angry. And angry code leaves a trail. He brought the logic bomb's architecture up on his own screen. This is your signature, clear as day. Any decent forensic analyst will see your digital fingerprints all over this payload. You're building a bomb to blow him up. He started to rewrite the code, his fingers moving with a speed I could not match. We, he said, are going to build a black box. When this goes off, it cannot be traced to us. It cannot look like an attack. It has to look like a catastrophic system error, triggered by his own unauthorized access. It has to look like he broke it. We worked for the next 3 hours, side by side, in perfect, cold, silent unison. We buried the trigger deep inside a string of false protocols. We masked the source code. We turned my weapon of rage into a surgical instrument of mutually assured destruction. When we were finished, Ben leaned back. It's done, he said. When he runs this, it will vaporize him, and the only fingerprints on the trigger will be his. The next week was a blur of calculated action. The target date was set Julian and Sophia's grand presentation. They had booked the grand ballroom at the most expensive hotel in downtown Denver. This was it. This was their public launch, the moment they would present my stolen algorithm, packaged as their own innovation, to a room full of primary investors, with Arthur Croft sitting in the front row. Ben and I operated out of my secure office, which had become a war room. We worked for 72 hours straight, subsisting on black coffee and a shared cold fury. We did not sleep. We ran simulations. We tested the payload. He'll be running it from a new server, Ben said, his eyes red-rimmed but intensely focused. The trigger can't just be the code execution. It has to be specific. The date, the time, and the MAC address of the presentation laptop he'll be using. How do we get that? I asked. He's still using the shared server. Right. Still pulling your honeypot data. I nodded. He accessed the audit folder again this morning. He's building his case against me. Good, Ben said. We'll send him a little gift. He crafted a single corrupted image file, a design comp for the presentation that I'd accidentally saved to the audit folder. The moment Julian downloaded it and opened it on his laptop and his ego would demand that he look, it would deploy a silent tracker, logging his machine's unique identifier. We waited. The alert came at 2 a.m. Julian had taken the bait. We now had the final key. Ben integrated it into the logic bomb. The code was now a thing of brutal, surgical beauty. It was a digital landmine, set to detonate on that specific laptop, on that specific date, at the exact minute 4:15 p.m. that Julian was scheduled to begin the live demonstration. The payload was multi-layered. When Julian clicked the execute button, he would not get the projected profit graphs he was expecting. Instead, the logic bomb would activate. Phase 1. It would instantly sever his connection to the ballroom's local network and use his own laptop's internet connection to route switch to a secure server Ben and I had set up, one registered in a non-extradition country. Phase 2. Every screen in that room, the main projector, the monitors, the investors' tablets that were networked in would flash. They would go black for 1 second, and then a single, stark message would appear in white block letters. Vigilant Analytics Intellectual Property. Breach in progress. All activities are being logged. After 5 seconds long enough for the panic to set in, Phase 3 would execute. It would not be a graph of my projections. It would be a ledger. It would display, in real time, a complete, itemized, and time-stamped accounting of every dollar he had stolen. It would show the transfers from the Vigilant R&D Fund. It would show the consulting fees to Croft Vance Solutions. And then, highlighted in red. It would show the corresponding transfers from my family, the $800,000, my parents' retirement fund, Chloe's savings. Their names would be right there on the screen. The entire financial architecture of his fraud laid bare for his investors and his new father-in-law to see. While Ben finalized the code, I moved on to the next phase. I opened a secure portal. I was no longer just a CEO. I was a whistleblower. I drafted a formal complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I laid out every piece of evidence: the fraudulent loan, the shell company, the theft of corporate assets, the wire fraud, the attempted mortgage fraud on my penthouse, and the conspiracy with Arthur Croft to manipulate the market by stealing proprietary technology. I attached the forged signature, the fake marriage certificate, and the complete ledger of stolen funds. I set the filing to go public not at the start of the presentation, but at the exact moment the logic bomb was set to detonate. The moment Julian's world vaporized, the SEC complaint would become public record. The final pieces. I called Sarah Jensen, the journalist. "Sarah," I said, "it's not a tip anymore. It's the story. Be at the Grand Ballroom, 4 p.m., and bring a cameraman. Arthur Croft is about to make the biggest acquisition of his career." My last call was to the regional FBI field office, to an agent I had worked with on a previous corporate espionage case. I laid out the evidence of wire fraud and the conspiracy to defraud my family of their retirement savings. "They'll all be in one room," I said. "The Grand Ballroom, 4 p.m. The pieces were set. The trap was built. All the variables were accounted for. It was the day. The presentation was scheduled for 4 p.m. The air in the house was still, heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm breaks. I had done everything. The code was set. The authorities were notified. The trap was baited. All I had to do was wait for the final variable to walk into it. My personal phone, the one I had left on the bedside table, buzzed. It was 1:30 p.m. A text from Julian. "Hey," it read. "I'm still completely jammed up at the summit. The weather here is a nightmare. I feel terrible about missing our anniversary. I love you." I stared at the words. I love you. The casual, easy lie. The final, reflexive insult. He was sitting in a luxury hotel, preparing to destroy me, preparing to steal my family's future, and he still had the audacity to type those 3 words. It was the last piece of data I needed. It was the final nail in his coffin. The rage I felt was so pure, so cold, it was almost peaceful. My fingers did not tremble as I typed my reply. I crafted the message as carefully as I had crafted the logic bomb. "I know," I typed. "It's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm actually in the city right now for a last-minute meeting. I might be able to stop by. I have an anniversary surprise for you, too." The bait was in the water. His reply was instantaneous. "That's great. You should stop by the presentation. It's at 4 p.m., the Grand Ballroom. It's going to be a big moment for us." I could feel the sickening, arrogant smirk behind the text. Us. He was inviting me, his supposedly unstable, work-obsessed, clueless wife, to his own coronation. He wanted me to be in the audience, to watch him on stage with his new, brilliant partner. He thought he was inviting me to my own humiliation. He could not, in his wildest narcissistic dreams, imagine that I was the one setting the stage. "I'll try," I typed back. "See you then." I put the phone down and picked up my encrypted device. I sent 2 messages. To Sarah Jensen, the journalist, confirming the address, the Grand Ballroom, 4 p.m. You will not want to miss this. Her reply was a simple, confirmed. To the SEC agent I had been working with, all parties will be present at the location. 4 p.m. The presentation is the act itself. The reply, we are in position. One last call to make. I dialed my parents' home. My sister, Chloe, picked up, her voice sounding small and worried. Ilara. Chloe, hey, I said, my voice perfectly light, perfectly normal. Is Mom there? Put me on speaker. I heard fumbling, and then my mother's anxious voice. "Alara, darling, are you all right? We've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, infusing my voice with a warmth I did not feel. "In fact, I'm great. I'm calling with good news. I'm in Denver. You are?" "Yes, and listen, Julian has a huge surprise for all of you. About that investment you made." I heard a sharp intake of breath. "The fund," my father's voice chimed in. "Is it doing well?" "It's bigger than that," I said. "He's making the big announcement today." "He was so excited. He wanted you all to be here. He has seats for you, right in the front row, the grand ballroom, downtown, 4 p.m. "Oh, my goodness," my mother gushed. "He's such a good man. Of course. Darling, we'll be there." "I know," I said. "He can't wait to see you. I'll meet you there." I hung up. This was the final, necessary, brutal move. They had to be there. They had to see the numbers on the screen. They had to see the man they had trusted, the man they had chosen over me for exactly what he was. They would not believe my words, but they would believe the data. It was 3 o'clock. Time to get ready. I walked into my closet, past the silks and cashmere Julian had bought me, all the soft things designed to make me a wife. I ignored them all. I reached for the suit I had custom made, the one I wore for hostile negotiations. It was a deep charcoal gray, cut with surgical precision. I paired it with a stark white silk blouse. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. No stray pieces, no vulnerability. My makeup was a mask of command. My heels were high and sharp enough to puncture concrete. I looked in the mirror. I did not see Alara Vance, the wife. I saw Alara Vance, the CEO. I was not dressed for a party. I was not dressed for seduction. I was dressed for war. I picked up my purse, left my personal phone on the bed, and walked out the door. I entered the grand ballroom at 4 p.m. on the dot. The room was packed, soft, expensive lighting, the quiet murmur of investors waiting to be impressed, and there he was, on stage, under a spotlight, Julian. He was adjusting his microphone, looking every inch the visionary CEO. Beside him, in a sharp, white dress, was Sophia, beaming. In the front row, I saw Arthur Croft, his arms crossed, looking skeptical and powerful, and 2 seats down from him, looking proud, innocent, and completely out of place, were my parents and my sister Chloe. They were beaming, gazing up at Julian with absolute adoration, waiting for their miracle. Julian scanned the back of the room as the lights dimmed. He saw me. I watched his expression shift. He gave me a small, smug, pitying smile. The smile of a man who believed he was putting down a sick animal. It was the look he had been practicing. "I'm sorry you have to see this," it said. He turned back to the audience. He began his presentation. He was smooth. He was charming. He spoke of new horizons, of disruptive technology, and of the vision he and his brilliant partner Sophia had built. Then he arrived at the main event. "But," he said, his voice booming with false confidence, "why tell you, when I can show you?" He clicked the button. It was 4:15 p.m. The main screen behind him flickered. It did not show the polished graphs of projected profits. The screen went black. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Julian's smile faltered. He tapped his laptop. "Just a small technical," he began. Then the words appeared, in stark, white, block letters, on every screen in the room. "Vigilant Analytics Intellectual Property. Breach in progress. All activities are being logged." The room was silent. Julian began frantically pounding the keys on his laptop, his face pale. Sophia had her hand over her mouth. "What is this?" Arthur Croft's voice boomed from the front row. "Julian, what is the meaning of this?" Julian could not answer, because Phase 3 had just executed. The ledger appeared. My ledger. The first line item, fraudulent loan, forged signature $1 million. The next, stolen assets, Vigilant Analytics R&D Fund. The next, wire transfer, Croft Vance Solutions LLC. The numbers just kept scrolling. I could hear Sarah Jensen's cameraman in the corner, the quiet click and whir as he started filming, the live feed going straight to the journal. Sophia had backed away from Julian, her face a mask of white-hot terror. Her father was on his feet, screaming at his lawyers. And then, the final data, highlighted in red: wire fraud, source, Robert and Carol Vance Retirement Fund, $450,000, wire fraud, source, Chloe Vance Savings, $350,000. I looked at my family. Their proud smiles were gone, replaced by grotesque masks of confusion and horror. My mother's hand was at her throat. My father looked like he could not breathe. Chloe was just staring, tears welling, as she finally understood. At that exact moment, as if summoned by the data itself, the main doors of the ballroom swung open. 2 men and a woman in dark, official suits stepped inside. "Julian Vance," the lead agent called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. Julian was frozen, a digital ghost, his face illuminated by the scrolling list of his own crimes. He turned, his eyes wide and panicked, and he saw them. Then he saw me. I was walking down the center aisle. I was not rushing. I walked past the shocked investors. I walked past Sarah Jensen. I walked past my broken family. I walked all the way to the front, where a spare microphone sat on the moderator's table. Julian's eyes were locked on mine. The hate, the fear, the disbelief. "You," he whispered, the single word a breath of pure poison. I picked up the microphone. I clicked it on. The quiet pop silenced the room. "He called it grounding him," I said. My voice was amplified, steady, and cold, echoing through the grand hall. "I call it forensic accounting." I looked at my family, at their shattered faces. Then I looked back at Julian, just as the agents took his arms and began to place the handcuffs on him. "My mistake," I said, my voice clear and final. "I evaluated all the variables. I just forgot to account for stupid." I placed the microphone back on the table. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the flashing screens, the crying, the federal agents, and the entire smoking crater of the life he had tried to steal. I walked out of the grand ballroom, and I did not look back. Thank you for listening to my story. Comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.